Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to another podcast of The Miracles and the Word. I'm Patricia Diorio, and I'm here with my colleague and dear friend, Reverend Diane Lund. And we're happy to welcome you to this week's show. And Diane's going to share with you what we're going to talk about today.
Great. Thank you, Patricia. Yes, today on Miracles on the Word, we're going to look at success and failure. What does it mean in the world to be a success? And what does it mean to fail? So, we're going to look at that concept from the point of view of the Word, which is a series of books written by Paul Selig. He channeled them. And also, there you go, that Patricia's holding up, and also the Course in Miracles, which I don't have with me right this moment. I should have it, but I have it downstairs where I usually sit and read it at night. So yeah, so we'll take a look at those two concepts. So Patricia, what is your definition of success?
Well, before I give you my definition of success, I want to share a story about how I was raised in my childhood. My dad was an immigrant from Italy and my mother was from Poland. And the two things they had in common were their love for each other, which was wonderful, and Catholicism. But as far as that goes, no, not too much in common. However, success for both of them was equated in money.
Mm,
Money. You're successful if you have money. It didn't even make that much difference what you did as long as the money was there. Because if you had money in whatever you were doing in life as a job and you were considered successful.
mm,
And I always measured myself against that as a little girl growing up and as a young woman. And I was a teacher and a social worker. I didn't make a lot of money.
mhm,
The truth is that money was never my priority. Money
mhm,
was never, I mean, it wasn't about I have to make the money. It was like money was what I needed in order to raise my son, which I did as a single parent. So money was important in that regard, but it was never on the top of my priority list. But
mhm.
service was, frankly, I was always about making a difference in that regard. And I'm still about that today, except my focus is the helping people really more deeply aligned with their spiritual work.
Mhm.
So um, money to me is not success.
Mhm.
Money is to me is however you define success for yourself.
Mhm.
Money for me is a perception. It's an attitude. I feel that, although I don't have millions of dollars in my life, I would never be considered an affluent woman necessarily. I take care of myself, and I'm fine. But I wouldn't I wouldn't say that I'm not successful. I love what I do. I love doing this. I
Mhm.
love speaking about spirituality. I love helping people understand the truth of who we are as spirit in the body. I
Mhm.
love that. And to me, that is success. So that's how I define it. I define success as whatever you perceive it to be that really lights you up and makes you happy.
Well, I agree with you that I would say the Western world looks at success largely in terms of money. If you have money, you must be successful, right? But money for sure doesn't mean happiness. I learned that very, very young. Having a lot of money doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be happy. And I'll tell you a little story. You told me one about yours. Well, when I was a kid, my dad was an architect and he hung out with a lot of developer friends. So these people had lots of money. They bought big tracts of land and they built shopping centers and um, towers, business towers. And these people had a lot of money. And my dad hung out with them. And he went to the golf and country club with them and he schmoozed with them. And one of the people, my dad's very best friend, had a lot of money, a lot of money. And one of his businesses went awry and he was losing a lot of money per day. I can't imagine what it was, but just say, way back then, 50 years ago, it was $100,000 a day or something like that. It was a lot of money and for the time. And he committed suicide over it. Do you know he had more than one family and all of his children, which was I don't know, 7 of them or something, never had to work another day in their lives. That's how much money he had. But he didn't obviously think he had it because he committed suicide over it. And so that taught me as a young kid, that was so shocking. And to have it be my dad's best friend, I learned money doesn't guarantee happiness because he died. And yet he had enough money for all of his kids to live without having to work years and years after his death. So it was a headspace for him, obviously. He got caught up in thinking he didn't have enough. When, like, what is enough? That's another question we could ask. But today we're asking, what is success? So I think the Western world, does define it a lot of times by success, or a lot of times by degrees, by, if you've gone to school and you've got your master's or your doctorate or this or that, then you're, successful. But I think that really, how do I define success for myself? It's always been spiritual evolution. For me, because I learned very young that money could be disastrous, actually, and it didn't make you happy, that made me start to question my whole world. And when I questioned my world, I turned to spirituality. I wanted deeper answers. And I've always wanted deeper answers, and that's still why we're talking today. I've always wanted to answer the big questions. What does success look like? Well, definitely success looks like, for me, whatever you can learn spiritually, evolving, because I believe that's the only thing you take with you in the end. You don't take your money, you don't take your house, you don't take your kids, you don't take your best friend. The only thing you take with you is what you've learned in your soul.
Right.
Your soul goes from life to life. So I think if I had to answer what success for myself, I would say I want to keep lifelong learning, soul learning, for as long as I can, because I think that's the one thing I get to take with me.
And I would say something else, and this is for both of us, my dear.
Hmm.
Us as spiritual teachers and guides have helped thousands of people. I'm 80, I've been doing this work for a long time. I was a social worker until I was 50, and then I retired from social work and I went into what I call spiritual social work, helping people with deepen their spirituality and teaching groups and doing readings with the tarot. And I mean, I've helped many, many, many people. And you, Diane, have helped hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of people. I mean, last year I took a course with Diane that was called Sacred Creative Arts. And it was her brainchild to bring forth this amazing course. We met every week. We met on Tuesday for an hour and a half, and on Wednesday we would have a Q&A. It seems like a lot of time, but it was wonderful in that she invited uh, her friends and her colleagues in the spiritual community all over the world to share what their gift was, what their gift they were bringing to the table with everybody. And every week we had a different person. And it was wonderful. It was like a smorgasbord, if you will, of all these, everything you can think of spiritually. So think about how the impact you had, Diane, and not only bringing all these amazing speakers to the fore, but all the women that participated.
Yeah, it was 50, no, 40 weeks and 40 different tools. So every week we looked at a different spiritual tool, a different tool to help you get in touch with your own inner world. Because there's lots out there that teaches you about the outer world, but there isn't a lot that teaches you about how do I access my inner world. In fact, this morning I was having a conversation with a girlfriend, and she was talking about clothes. We were talking about clothes because I just bought a bunch of new clothes. And she said to me, well, clothes have never been really important to you. And I said, no. I said, I have never really defined myself by money or clothes. And she said, yeah, I know that. She said, that's because you have such a rich inner life, Diane. And I thought, yeah, that's true. I do have a really rich inner life. So I don't feel I mean, it may not be wealthy in terms of the amount of money that I have in the world. Um, I'm not living on Billionaires Road or anything like that, or driving around in a yacht or a big fancy sports car. But I do feel rich inside, and I always have. I think that's why I turned to spirituality. As a young child, I had this feeling that I was so wealthy. And it was a big secret. I said, like, I can't tell anyone how wealthy I am because if they know, they'll be jealous. And, my parents were not rich. I remember my dad being in the garage building my bed. We didn't have a TV till I was 6. We were not fancy rich people. I mean, we were well off in terms of we never wanted for food or shelter or anything like that. But I did feel rich. So I think having a rich inner life and having so many ways to access that life is really what I want to help people do. How do I access it? Because so much of the world draws you to the outer part of the world, to your house, to your clothes, to your degrees, to your outwardness. But how do we feel rich on the inside? How do we feel fulfilled? I think that will be that each person has to answer that to find out their own personal success.
Well, where I've come to it myself is to at 80, um, I like to live to 120, by the way. I just sharing that with Diane
Me
today.
too. Me
I
too.
want to call a group, I want to gather a group of women called the Conscious Crones, the 120 Club, Um, but I was thinking, what if I died tonight or tomorrow?
Mhm.
What if I died?
It's a good question.
Would I feel like my life was a waste or I didn't achieve anything or I didn't accomplish anything? I'm an aspirational person. There are things that I want to do right now in life in whatever 20, 40 years I have left. Um, but I have to tell you, I feel completely fulfilled. And that should I die tomorrow, I will not feel as if my life had been for naught. I
That's
feel that
wonderful.
I have made my contribution with excitement and passion, and I know I've made a difference in the lives of the people that I've served. So
Yes.
in that way, my life has been a great success. And what more could I ask for, really?
I don't know. I have to laugh because your your kitty's paw is coming up on the screen and pawing at you. So yes, I mean I know you've got a cat that really loves you, and that
Yeah,
way
a
you're
cat
very
that's, I
rich.
have it's almost 18-year-old cat that's very attached to his mommy, and I have to confess I'm very attached to him as well. We have a very codependent relationship.
Yes.
Honey, this is Harmony Magic.
Aw, there's Harmony. Yeah.
Harmony.
What a beautiful cat.
But he's a beautiful cat. Yeah, thank you.
Yes, he's a beautiful cat.
So you too, Diane, should you leave the planet tomorrow? I
Well,
mean,
I have asked myself that very question, and in fact, I was in Kauai with my husband, and we were there on the first day of a trip. And we love Kauai coffee, so we wanted to go get a Kauai coffee. And we drove there, but there was a detour, so we had to take a different route. And we were sitting at the bottom of this hill waiting to turn left. And I never saw this, but a gigantic, huge, pink, bubblegum pink garbage truck was coming down the hill behind us, and I never heard a word or anything, but it hit us. But it hit us sideways and drove into the oncoming traffic. Brian said, I just heard him go, "Ah!" That's my husband. Just, "Ah!" That's all I heard before we were hit. Turns out the guy said that I guess he was looking at his phone or something, and when he looked up, he realized he was going to hit us. And because he had such a huge pink garbage truck and we were such a little car, a little rental car, he thought, I'm going to kill him. And so he drove into the oncoming traffic rather than go right over top of us, and it
wow.
would have crushed us. So the next day I'm sitting around the pool and my sisters are coming, and I'm thinking to myself, what if I died yesterday? because I could have. That guy really saved our lives by driving into the oncoming traffic and not just hitting us, but many cars. How would I feel if my sisters were coming to pick up my dead body? Because they were coming for my 20th wedding anniversary with their husbands. And I said, I feel good. I feel okay. Except for one thing. One thing. I didn't write those books. I was going to write those books and I didn't write them. So when I got home, I made a girlfriend of mine, I made a pact with her that she had to hold my feet to the fire so I'd write these books. And I think I wrote 3 books in the end. And I wasn't going to talk about them, but here they are. 3 books, all about A Course in Miracles. And the reason I wrote them was because that would have been the only thing I would have regretted had I died that day, that I didn't write those books. And, now I've written the books. So I don't think I'd have any regrets now because I feel like it's out there.
Yeah, now you're applying your creativity to the art of painting. And it's been wonderful because I've watched this woman be an amazing spiritual teacher and facilitator of this program I told you about. And then everything else she's done aside from that. I mean, we're friends, what now, 3 years, Diane? Something like that.
Yeah. Around that, yeah.
But the you've done so much in your life and service to others, and you've made your money too, that I can see where you would really have no regrets.
No, I don't really feel I would have any regrets. I think that I've followed my heart and I've done what's in my heart. It wasn't ever driven by money. Although I must say money was part of the equation. I did say I don't want to be a starving artist. I did say that. I wanted to be a writer, producer, but I didn't want to starve. I wanted to pay the rent. I wanted to make enough money to go buy groceries and run a car. So yeah, that was all. Money was in the equation, but it just wasn't the driver. It
So now
wasn't
you
the
can do
driver.
the art, now you can do the artwork, now you can do your painting.
We'll see, because as you know, that came out of the Sacred Creative Arts course I taught. I did a week on feng shui, and I won't go into the whole experience. You can take a look on my website, miraclesandwonders.ca, and you can look at the outline for the course. But one week we were doing feng shui, and I decided to clean up a fish tank in my kitchen, which is in the north. So feng shui is all about cleaning up your house or reorganizing a part of your house or your office so that the chi flows smoothly and it's not getting stuck. So in the direction where my fish tank was, it was in the north, and what it represented was career. And so, wow, what a shock that when I cleaned up the fish tank, this whole new career direction emerged, which was painting. Up to that point in my life, I'd never done a painting. And I certainly didn't think of myself as an artist, as a painter. I might have thought of myself as a writer. Well, I did think of myself as a writer producer, but certainly not as a painter. So it's expanded my world. And, I have to say that it makes me happy. If you lose yourself, your time isn't existing because you're just happy.
Oh,
That's how I
yeah.
feel when I'm painting. I just feel
Mhm,
happy. And
mhm.
that's a new experience for me in my life, because I would say most of my life I felt not so much happy but busy.
Well, that's been me,
Busy.
busy, busy, busy. My spiritual life has saved me from being an irreversible workaholic. I say that because I actually participated in workaholic sessions, meetings
Hmm.
every week for a while. There were only 7 of us in the group because all the rest of the workaholics in town were working.
Well, I was going to say they were all working. They
But
wouldn't stop working.
it would have been an irreversible thing for me. And still, I have to pay attention to when I'm going to stop and breathe and be present. Being present is so important. If we could just understand that when we're present, we're aware of what we're thinking. We're aware of what we're thinking enough to say, this thought doesn't serve me. It's a negative thought. It's going to take me right down that rabbit hole of fear.
Hmm.
And then I'm going to manifest it because we're manifestors of our reality all the time, whether we know it or not, or like it or not. So presence gives us an opportunity to observe our thinking and make a choice about whether or not we want to make another choice. And
Hmm.
that has really been huge in my life, especially since I've been doing the word work,
Hmm.
because in the word work is the teaching of the guides who are channeled through Paul Selig, who wrote the book, tell us you cannot not be who you are. You cannot not be God.
Hmm.
And you cannot not create your reality all the time. You can
That's
be
right.
ignorant of it, which of course, with most people are ignorant of the fact that we're divine and ignorant of the fact that every thought is creating their reality. So presence has been and continues to be a very important talent. Not talent is not necessarily the right word, but choice to make and how we can be in the human experience. And how this kind of circles back to our conversation of doing, feeling like I have to be doing all the time because that's success. Do. Even if the money is there. I mean, money wasn't my priority, but doing was, and doing enough was. And so my spiritual
Yeah.
life,
And you're not a human doing,
yeah.
you're a human being.
And my spiritual life helped me to become a human being aware of the fact that I was a divine being having a human experience.
Hmm. I would agree. I mean, and I think I have been trying to stop doing, because when you have a company, I had Creative Wonders for, I still have it for over 30 years, and you have employees who are counting on you for their money to pay their rent, there's a feeling like I have to get busy and do, because there was a certain percentage I had to make every month in order to just break even, pay the rent, pay the employees. And so that kept me on the treadmill, doing. Well, now I've stopped that. I'm only taking a few clients. I'm painting. I stopped the course that I was teaching to be with my mother at the end of her life and really help her cross over. That was very meaningful. I mean, that was a success in my life. Was I stopped everything. I listened to my inner guidance. My inner guidance said, and this was before she was critically ill. My inner guidance said, stop everything. And I was like,
What?
stop everything? Like, I'm doing Sunday solutions, I'm doing sacred creative arts, I'm doing all of these different things. You want me to stop everything? And my mom wasn't that ill yet. In fact, she just actually had gotten a drug that had actually made her much happier that summer. So I started to hear this around November, December, and I followed it. And thank goodness I did, because I did have that opportunity to be with my mom every day for her last few months. And that was very challenging, but it certainly was successful. It certainly wasn't happy, but it certainly was important. I often say, people say, well, I just want my children to be happy. And I said, really? Happy? Really, I think what people want is meaning. I think people want to feel like what they did had some meaning in life, that there was something else behind it just besides being happy. Happy is wonderful, but I wasn't happy when I was helping my mother, but it was incredibly important.
Yeah. Well, I to, and I say this to parents that I see because I believe it myself. Our kids are going to make the decisions to be with the people they're going to be with, to do the work that they do, to make money or not make money, to whatever they want to do, to take care of their bodies or not take care of our bodies. And we can raise our children and do our very best as parents. But I finally came to the conclusion of I just want my son to be happy. If he's
Hmm.
happy, I'm happy. If
Hmm.
he's happy with the person he's with, if he's happy with the job he's doing, if he's happy in his body, then I'm happy. Of course, I have an opinion, but a lot of times parents could keep their opinions to themselves. the kids don't want to hear them. But for
Yes.
me, so for me, happy, I guess with me, I would say that meaning, meaningfulness is a part of my happiness.
Yeah, I think it's a part of
I think
my
it's a part of
happiness.
happiness. Yeah.
Yeah,
Because you
I
can
mean,
give someone millions of dollars who would think that they would be happy, but there's no meaning in their lives. Or what are they doing? Watching television or going to sports or whatever. I mean, it's not necessarily a lot of money, which most people equate as success as being happy.
yeah, and I think most people think that if they make more money, they will be happier. And they have proven statistically that I think you need, I think it's like up to about $80,000 a year. And after that, it doesn't make much difference to your happiness level. There's a certain level that people need to make in order to just keep life moving, pay the bills, not be stressed about money all the time. But then after that, they've proven that you can make twice that much and it doesn't really affect your happiness. And so, what is success? That's the question we have today. And what is failure? Well, I think you just read a Marianne Williams thing where she said the only failure is not learning from the mistakes that we make or the things that we are calling mistakes. I mean, I don't think the universe ever calls anything a mistake. I think we're allowed to be here because it's a playground. We are creators and we are creating our reality. And whatever we put out there, the universe doesn't judge, it just lets us play. And it lets us see the consequences of our decisions with incredible accuracy. It's
It,
unbelievable how the accuracy that when we think it and we put it out there, how it comes back to see us, like attracts like. And so, yeah, I think thinking about success and failure is important in a society that really, really places success very high up on the shelf.
yeah, which means that failure is like you've really messed up here, and that's so difficult for people. What I've come to in my years of life here, especially I said these last 10 years especially,
Hmm.
this is what I believe about failure. Failure is a gift in disguise.
I
Failure
like
is
that.
a gift in disguise. When you fail, don't beat yourself up about it. Don't beat yourself up about it. Look for the gift. Look for the gift. And the gift is there because when we fail, according to how society interprets failure or defines failure,
Hmm.
then that anger and being ashamed, disappointed in ourselves, and oh, wah, wah, wah. No, no, no. Look at the gift there. What did the failure bring you? What level of awareness did it bring you to? So you can learn the lesson, A, not necessarily to do that again, or B, realize that um, it wasn't a failure because a wonderful thing came out of that so-called failure.
Almost always that happens. And from a Course in Miracles perspective, they call them mistakes. There is no sin, only
Yes,
mistakes.
takes, right.
Mistakes. So, so it's like take one, take two. Oh, you didn't get it. Let's
Yes,
take three. The universe is endlessly giving. It wants you to get it. It
yeah,
wants you to evolve. It wants you to be the best you can be. So if you make a mistake or you think it's a mistake, don't worry because it's going to bring it around again for another take. And if you didn't get it then, don't worry. It's bringing it around again. That's what I love about the universe. It's endlessly giving endlessly forgiving to you and to
right.
everyone else.
And no judgment. No,
No judgment. No,
whatever we put out to the universe is we're choosing to have it. So be careful what you're putting out there that you want. There's a lot of cliche expressions going back to all of these different sources. Watch out what watch out what you ask for, because you may get it, or what goes around comes around, or what are other ones about uh
yeah, well, definitely that whole idea that what you put out, you get back in return.
Right.
It,
Right.
it's a concept. It's a law of physics. For every
Diane,
action,
I
there's
want
an
to
equal
tell
and opposite reaction. That's the law in physics. For
I
every
want to
action,
tell a story about failure. Can I tell a story about one of my what I considered the biggest failure in my life?
all right.
Time.
Yes.
Just a little bit of background on me. I had a television show here in Santa Barbara in public access. I had it for many years, 14 years. I did about 335 shows. And I had one of my biggest dreams as a person so interested in spirituality uh, was to interview one of my favorite teachers, the Deepak Chopra. You probably know about Deepak Chopra if you're watching us. Anyway, through a very serendipitous series of circumstances, I have a mutual friend that was also a very close friend of Deepak's. And I asked him if he would ask Deepak if he would come on my show, my little public access television show, you know. So he asked Deepak, and Deepak said, yes. Well, you know, this was in the fall, and the show was going to happen on March 12th, I think, 2016. In fact, you can even go online, and if you go to March 2016, you can see the show. Well, the show out of 335 shows was unequivocally the worst
Oh,
show
no.
that I ever did. I
Why?
considered it my absolute failure. I couldn't get ready. I did everything I possibly could to get ready for the show. I reviewed all of my data. I listened to all of my recordings on Deepak. I reviewed his books. I came up with a list of excellent questions, and I got my crew way ahead of time. I lined up my crew, so I had plenty of crew for the day. I had uh, people standing in volunteering if one of my crew people were, late. So I have a makeup artist that would come to do my shows. She would, do all the professional television makeup and stuff. So I got her way ahead of time. Well, the day of the show, in the morning, she calls me to say that she's going to be an hour late to do my makeup. I'm going an hour late to do my makeup. I said, no, no, you can't be an hour late to do my makeup. She says, I'm sorry, but my boss booked and I have to see this person. I'm real. So now I can do my makeup. I didn't choose to do my makeup. I had a photographer there. She could have done my makeup. I didn't choose to her. I said, I chose to wait for the makeup artist to show up. That was the huge mistake because Deepak Chopra arrived early.
Oh,
And the bottom line here is that I kept him sitting on my little public access television set for like 20 minutes before I got my butt out there. And then I stumbled over my words. I was just a wreck, a wreck. And because I had such a fabulous editor, who's a dear friend of mine to this day, she was able to edit the show. So it actually is a good show. If you go watch it, it's very entertaining. He was great. I had a co-host that worked with me on it. And I'll never forget one of the things he said in the show that was really the highlight for me. He said, we're God in drag. I never
for God in drag.
God in drag. I never forgot that. But anyway, what I wanted to tell you is that I was a mess after that show.
Mm,
I beat myself up unmercifully for months. I'm talking at least 3 months before I could let it go.
mm,
I can remember going the next day and sitting at the ocean and just sobbing and how I could. And, I was hoping that he would open the door for me in media and he would introduce me to people and he didn't like me. He didn't like me at all. He, in fact, the fellow that actually got him for me, I took he and his wife to dinner and I said, so how is Deepak? And he looked at me and he said, this is what he said. He said, well, he was pretty much of a crispy critter when he left there. I'll never, I'll never forget him saying he was a crispy critter. Anyway, I beat myself up unmercifully and I ended up writing him a letter. I don't know if he ever got it. And what I talked about in the letter was what was it that I needed to learn there?
mm,
And it was about perfectionism
mm.
because one of my one of the ways that I set myself back as a young woman growing up was to feel that because I felt so unworthy and undeserving, that I had to be a perfect person in the world. I had to be perfect all the time. I had to look perfect and act perfect and do perfect things. And you know what? Not going to happen because guess what? We live in an imperfect world. There's nothing that's perfect about this
We do.
world,
We
except
live in an
in,
imperfect world.
imperfect world. The irony of it is that here I was a perfect being, a spiritual being having a human experience. I was a perfect being in an imperfect world, trying to be perfect, and it wasn't going to happen. So that was a huge lesson for me.
Mhm.
The other lesson was this: I put this person on a pedestal, Deepak Chopra on a pedestal, and I completely gave my power away to the situation and to him. And I love Deepak. He's a great guy, but he wasn't very gracious about what happened. And I felt very sad about that. And he lost a lot of fans that day because there were a lot of people in the audience. And so I share that story because I was positive it was I failed miserably. I failed miserably. What was the gift? The gift was perfectionism in the material world is an illusion.
It is an illusion.
And don't
And
put
one thing I've learned is that people actually like it when we are authentic. We're human. We make mistakes. We stumble. We don't always say the right thing. You know, it just is the way it is. And that actually causes a lot of laughter in the world. I
it
mean, if
does.
you think about comedians, they're putting really unrealistic things together that makes us laugh, right? They look at something in a new way and it's like, yeah.
In television shows, they put the bloopers out there, usually at
Yeah,
the
they
end.
put the bloopers out there because people
They put
love
the
them,
bloopers
right?
out there that are hysterical because you see all these actors that are, they're actors and they make mistakes and they burst out laughing themselves because it's so funny.
They do. And so, anyways, I've picked a card because that's how we end up on each of these shows. We end up with a card. And I just pick one out of my pile here. And today I've picked this one. It says, Projection makes perception. The world you see is what you gave it, nothing more than that. And isn't that perfect for what we're talking about? The world you see is what you gave it, nothing more than that. In other words, what do you think success is? Success is what you see it as,
Exactly.
you know,
Exactly.
and you get to define that. And we like to define it with the word and A Course in Miracles. Projection makes perception. So what we project out into the world, we perceive back. And so I've had a story like you where I was trying to impress an editor once of a magazine called Common Ground, and he was a big hero of mine. And I went to lunch with him, and I was strolling into the lunch, and I didn't see that there was a step, and I fell flat on my face
In front of him.
right in front of his table, flat on my face. And I said to him, well, that was one way to make an entrance. I mean, it was very embarrassing, but we had a good laugh.
You had a good laugh. I've done that too. You know who I did that with?
No.
Greg Braden. I
Oh,
was
great,
chasing
great.
after him at a conference trying to get his attention. And
Yeah.
I said, Greg, Greg. And he turned around and I just splat right on my belly in front of him. It was a good laugh, but I was tremendously embarrassed. You know what I didn't get with my cards? I've got to get my cards. Please excuse me. I'm going to get my cards. Read that quote again.
I will read this quote again from A Course in Miracles. It says, projection, what we project out into the world, makes perception, what we perceive back. The world you see is what you gave it, nothing more than that. So success is what we want to see it as. Do we want to see it as money? Do we want to see it as spiritual evolution? What is success? I think probably each of us will define it for ourselves.
Yeah, that's what I'm asking each of you to do. How do you define success? Don't
Mhm.
define it. Well, I'm not saying don't define it as money because if you define success as money, then fine, but too many, especially in the West, define having a lot of money as being successful.
Yes, and I think it was Mother Teresa that said something about, you know, the West has lots of money, but it's spiritually bankrupt.
Yeah.
So you can have a lot of money and not be very conscious of what you're putting out into the world, what you're projecting.
Mhm.
and then what you're perceiving back.
I
So
would say this, if you're doing what you love, if you are doing what lights you up,
mhm.
regardless of whether you're making a dime, then you are successful in life. When you think about how many people, especially in the West, have kiss-ass 9 to 5 jobs, you know, where their nose is just above the waterline, they're just able to make it and they're not doing what they love and they're barely making the money. Or worse than that, the golden handcuffs, people that are making 6 figures and more, but are miserable in what they do, which infects their health and their family life and their relationships. So do what you love. Do what you love.
Do what you love, and the money will follow generally.
Right. And Maya Angelou has a great quote about that. She says, "Don't make money your goal. Do what you love and do it so well people can't take their eyes off of you."
That's a good one. Well, let's pull the final card.
Okay, so here is the tarot card. What shall the question be here, Diane? What is
Well,
our guide? What is our guidance about success?
give us a card that talks about success.
Okay. What would our guidance today be about success and failure, both of them?
Okay.
Brilliance. Brilliance is the mind of the magician, and the magician in the tarot and the Voyager deck that I work with is the law of talent and manifestation. So it's the mind of talent and manifestation. And I think what the universe is telling us here, what spirit is telling us here, is have brilliant thoughts. Have brilliant thoughts. If you have brilliant thoughts, what are you going to be doing? You're going to be feeling good feelings, move brilliant thoughts into the field. And then when you talk about your aspirations, when you talk about what you want to do, then what you're doing is you're putting it out there and you're manifesting it. And if you put out what you want to do, if those brilliant thoughts are put out into the field, then the universe is going to bring you everything that you need to make that happen, including the money including the money. So brilliance is a beautiful card.
It
Yeah.
is a gorgeous card, and that's wonderful. Note to wrap up this segment of Miracle and the Word. So thank you, Patricia.
Yes, thank you. Today was fun. I really enjoyed it. And our websites, if you want to check out our work, my website is alignwiththedivine.net. And there's a lot of information on there about my circles and my tarot readings. And if you'd be interested in working with me, just reach out to me through my website. And Diane?
Yes, my website is Miracles and Wonders. Miracles because I am a reverend specialized in A Course in Miracles, and Wonders because my company that I've had for over 30 years is Creative Wonders. So I love talking to people about how they can creatively manifest a life full of what they would call success. So have a rich life. I like to have a rich inner life. You maybe want more of a rich outer life, or maybe you need to balance that back and forth. There are evergreen courses on my website. You can sign up for Sacred Creative Arts. I'm not teaching it at the moment, but it probably will be next year. And you can sign up for my Monday Miracle Moments, which are free. You get them every Monday, just a short, 2 to 3 minute video. And
I
that,
think it's so interesting that you and I came together with Miracles and Wonder being your website.
yeah,
And it was during it, it wasn't even Diane's idea to do Miracles and the Word. I was channeled through me because when I met her on a summit, I was speaking and I heard her speak and I went, oh my God, someone else is talking about channeled work. I'm not alone. And honestly, I heard a voice in my that came through me that said, you're going to work with this woman. You're going to do a show, and it's going to be called Miracles and the Word. And it was like, there's our logo in the back.
yeah, and here it is, Miracles and the Word. So
And
thank you
miracles
for
and
joining
wonders.
us. We've really appreciated it.
Thank you very much, and we'll see you next time.
Bye
Bye.
now.